As a man, you must in no way resemble a woman. Women are ignorantly deemed weak, inferior, and emotional. Therefore, a man can't be seen embracing such characteristics, especially not emotional, which is understandable being that the man is the protector and the provider for his family, right? Can being boxed in this conclusion that men can't embrace emotions be a hindrance? A man mustn't be weak, and emotions are labeled as weak and inferior, yet anger and overbearing aggression is the only exception. Per Travis Bradbury and Gene Grievous, authors of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, as you move through your daily routine, you are subject to a constant stream of emotions. How many emotional interactions do we disassociate ourselves with because we have an unhealthy relationship with our emotions, with having the authority over our emotional exposure and only embracing anger? Isn't that a contradiction?
The tradition of masculinity, for me, specifically, it's about the qualities that are associated with men. So that would be like strength, emotional stability, financial freedom, financial security, and like how that manifests itself. It's like men aren't supposed to cry. Men are supposed to be champions of their own sex and the sex of their partner. Men are supposed to be financially free, and they're supposed to be independent with their own goals and their finances and whatnot. Like those are just the things that I think of when I think of masculinity.
Me being raised, my father died when my mom was 3 months pregnant with me. So I never knew my dad, but I had a stepdad that I had a really rocky relationship with. So I didn't learn necessarily masculinity in the house, although the stepfather was abusive to me, he did pay the bills and make sure the bills were paid. And so I think responsibility is a real big thing when you talk about traditional masculinity, taking over where the man who taught you or whoever provided for your family that you grew up in. And you as a boy child are supposed to be taught on how to take over, how to come in and take over and handle a household, how to raise the children. So the qualities of masculinity traditionally for a man to me come from it started with your childhood and upbringing, and as you grow up, traditionally the man is the person, and everybody may not like it, but traditionally the man is the person in charge. And so the traditional masculinity, I think that you have to make sure that you are providing examples that everybody want to follow. And I think that masculinity brings security. And when the man comes in and is masculine, people feel a little more secure with him around. You know, they value what he has to say, so it's all about the mindset as well.
As a young boy growing to be a man, the tradition of masculinity is a necessity. But the question is, when and how does the conversion conclude to hypermasculinity? The area of concern increases when you are not aware of the negative aspects provoked by social constructs imposing on what a man is supposed to be.
I think for me, traditionally, along with what you both said, I think it also includes, the idea that, whatever I say goes, having this perspective of, being able to conquer whatever, I do or whatever I'm able to get into. So, for example, a man can, he can get a job, and this idea that, because he's a man and it should be simple to learn certain things, he shouldn't have an issue with doing such. Even being, in the community, because the fact that you're masculine, you're a man, you should be able to, say certain things and younger people or people who are below you in age or rank, look up to you just by the stature of who you are, because you are a man, you know what I mean? So things like that.
I mean, and based on what you said, as far as, I believe that our masculinity, I mean, it's such a broad question. I mean, because you don't know if that starts at birth or if that's because you're going to be a whole different, I can tell you guys, I'm 58 years old and I'm nothing like when I was 18. So when I was 8 years old, I can remember the abuse and stuff from my dad. That interrupted my masculinity process. But when I got 18 years old and some other men in the community started working with me and teaching me what it was to be a man, and I don't think that masculinity necessarily means what I say go or do as I say. I think masculinity means understanding that everybody in the family, how I handle it in my family, is that everybody in the family have an opinion, even the little baby that you can't understand. You know, instead of hollering at her, try to figure out what she's saying and what the need is, because that's what I think masculinity is all about. It's about taking charge. But it's also about understanding that you are the head patriarch of a family, or you're going to become that. So what being a man is, honesty. It's about understanding that just because you can hit harder doesn't mean that you should. You know, sometimes when men take on that, do as I say, not as I did, doesn't mean you're always right either. So if you take that rule, you may lead your whole family wrong. You know, so
having power over your environment and the power is centralized by being able to make people do what you want them to do and making stuff happen how you want it to happen. So it's basically finding power in like dominating others and other things, and that's kind of like where it's centralized in. Once like people use like money and finances as like the pinnacle of being a man traditionally, or like a test of your masculinity or whatnot, that and your sexuality. Those are the main two that's traditionally like what it's determined off of, and people like don't acknowledge the rest of like anything. It's just as long as those two are secure by archaic standard, then they consider you a man.
It's interesting too, because I'm sitting here and I'm a talker, I'm a teacher, I do a lot of teaching, but I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I'm 58 years old. I'm thinking you're 20 something, right?
I'm 21.
20 something, I'm thinking that you're 20 something.
Correct.
And you're 20 something. So you guys are gonna be very much so in relations to what you talk about, because you got that amount of years. But you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about 58 years of living, unless you had that example in your household and you watched older people, for real, because I'm thinking past even what you are thinking about, because when you come 35, when you get married, when you have a baby, masculinity become a whole nother thing for you. Even that's when you even begin to evaluate your own sexuality and your future, where your plans are and everything, because you got children now. You know, I'm not sure if any of you all have children, but it makes a big difference.
I wanted to make the point because you had said like from your upbringing and your experience, you had said like the role that the man figure in your life, your stepfather, when you were young, like his toxic behavior derailed your like your progress in your own manhood. And I'm just thinking of my own experience. Like I grew up in a single parent household with my mom being the head of our family, and my grandmother taking on both like kind of the father figure and more so the mother figure. So like as I look at on my own upbringing, I see it as like my first introduction of a man in my life was absence. However, that like looking back, that didn't necessarily derail me from my manhood. It gave me like my first introduction to what a man could be. But like looking back on it, it's like I learned pretty much the foundation of what I think a man should be from my mother, if that makes sense. So I would say like you don't necessarily have to have a biological man in your life in order to develop as a man, if that makes sense.
Like the society that we live in today, you have opportunities and you can use your skills to make money without ever even leaving your bedroom. So a lot of people do things in this city. Like a lot of young men and men do things in this city because they stuck on, they don't know what a man is, so they just go based off an ideal that's like attached to you have to make something happen by any means. But that comes with a lot of details and fine print. It's like you don't just make anything happen by any means, and just you don't burn the world down just so you can gain something. Like it's a lot of stipulations that come with that, and and a lot of people just get caught up in the oh, at least I got something, or at least I made this money, or at least I'm not him, or at least I can switch my outfits 3 times a day. So it's like they get caught in very vain things in order to try to validate the lack of contribution to the world that's positive.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kiss. As you move throughout your daily routine, you are subject to a constant stream of emotions. How many emotional interactions do we disassociate ourselves with because we have an unhealthy relationship with our emotions? With having the authority over our emotions and only embracing anger. Isn't that a contradiction?
I mean, I feel like it's being a protector, at least in my mind. I feel like it's being a protector and a provider, period.
I think it has to do with the teachings that men were taught from, more so like the ones that kind of stuck around. So the teachings they were taught back in the day, and then it kind of stuck. So like how men were taught like not to cry, or you're only supposed to be a provider, and all things like that. And they just kind of stuck. Even now in the present day, it's still like you're trying to get men away from that kind of thing. So that's my opinion on that.
Similar to what Love said, was about how men are raised throughout their family, how they are raised generationally, like what we bring from one generation to the next generation to the next generation.
Well, I think that it just all like comes to surface just like any person. Like I think it all comes to surface with behaviors. Like a lot of times if you don't know how to properly deal with or handle your emotions, that comes up where you have a lot of women, or you a cheater, or you can't control your anger when it comes to, so I guess that's how I take it.
And like what she said, men having multiple women, never really having a stable home or a stable relationship or just anything that's stable. And I think that's how it shows up. I think it's absolutely perfectly normal and okay for a man to channel their emotions. Why wouldn't you want to channel your emotions? But I also think that it leads back to that first question that you asked us, as in what is like the traditional when it comes to that. And it was like, I felt like from what I've learned from my granddad, was that they were basically taught not to channel those through talking. So when you don't talk about something, or when you don't have a positive outlet, you let it out however you can. It has to come out, and it's gonna come out, and sometimes it comes out in a way that's not good.
I have 4 sons. So I raised my sons to express their emotions, contrary even to their father's belief and standpoint on boys. So I know a lot of men and young men are taught not to cry, that it's not manly, that you could be perceived as being weak or even feminine for crying. And I always felt like that was just the stupidest thing, because we all human and we all have emotions for a reason. And so I think when men, first of all, I think men should most definitely express their emotions, all of them, as best they can, and not be ashamed for how they feel, and not be belittled or put down because they feel a certain way. I feel like men are very beautiful creatures, and to deny them the right to express their God-given emotion is silly, and it creates men who don't know how to express themselves. It creates men who use other people as an outlet, as opposed to being able to express themselves. They keep their crying in, then they don't know what they're doing with it. It's stuck up in there somewhere. So it's going to come out in a way that's not healthy for them or anyone around them. But I definitely feel men need to have a space to express all their emotions. They need to feel safe and not judged. And I believe all that comes with them loving themselves and not really caring a crap what other people say about them. And that takes some stuff that you got to work through to be able to do that.
When you don't have a positive outlet to let out the things that you hold inside, because they have to come out in one way or another, because it's just the way we're programmed, you usually channel it towards what you think would be more of a weaker subject, and usually women are the target of that. Sometimes it's children and and just things in the neighborhood or wherever you are. But I do agree with that statement.
Yes, I agree also. I feel that anytime you are not able to express yourself, or even before expressing yourself, even understanding why you even feel how you feel, I think that is something else that could. Yeah, so when men don't be able to express themselves, some stuff can happen. Like they can be bottled up. They can be in situations that cause their emotions to come out at the inappropriate time, to come out at a time that that's really not relevant to the issue at hand. There's always something deeper, and sometimes we just see the surface. But yes, I think if they don't have the opportunity to express themselves and are not received in a certain way, no matter what their emotions or their feelings, that it can have some repercussions, some backlash.
Yeah, I think a lot of times for men, because we don't live in this world where it's okay to express your emotions, and the only way to express them that is okay is anger or exploding. And so a lot of times it affects us as women or whomever in a negative way, and a lot of times that comes out in anger. And I think, like the ladies were saying, just having a positive, being able to express yourselves in some way, shape, form, or fashion is healthy for anybody.
And that's something that, we have to work with our young folks with too. I mean, when you look at, what's happening in our schools, our young people are just so easily swayed into having to have to defend themselves because they're not confident in who they are and what they represent. And, when I talk to a lot of young people, it's kind of that sense of, well, how can somebody take you off your piece when they don't know you,
Okay.
And you can't let them control you based on what they think or what they perceive. So you have to be, confident in yourself to know who you are and what you're about, because it just seems that's the way that a lot of our young people are existing nowadays, particularly in the school environment, is, they're trying to look for whoever they perceive as being the weak one, and then they'll prey on that individual. And that's where the bullying and all those other things tend to come out. And if you're confident in yourself and who you are, it's like, hey, you say what you want to say, but I'm good. Put your hands on me, it's a different story. But, you can say whatever you want to say. But, our young people, when it comes to words, they are given words so much value that, it's troubling. But again, if you can help young people to really identify who they are, they'd be able to survive no matter where they go.
It's the power in numbers. I think that's the biggest thing. When you're dealing with something in school, and even when we went to go talk at high school art, but we told people, find comfort in the people that you're familiar with. They don't have to look like you to understand them and so forth. So it can be a lot of people in school. And the biggest thing right now is not even just the face-to-face interactions, mainly social media. it's a different form of bullying now, social media. So, it's just, I think definitely with kids is more so, they're at a point of maturing, hopefully they can get themselves out of it, but some of them don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
they're stuck in a situation, not even a situation between like maturing, but like they're stuck in the communities that they live in, that they don't have those resources to find people that are interested in the same thing that they're interested in, just because the community is. And so, it's a lot of, it's a lot of stuff that goes, that goes head to head.
Masculinity means protecting, loving, nurturing, taking care of, possibly finance.
I think with dominance, it is kind of like, almost like being a control freak situation. So, because naturally I feel like human beings were just not, anything really isn't meant to be like control, you know what I'm saying? But in the sense of like masculinity, to me, is just taking care of business pretty much, you know what I mean? Make sure that you're providing for your loved ones, for your family, you know what I mean? Also be somebody that can also guide them too, right? So that's how I feel with masculinity.
As a young boy growing to become a man, the tradition of masculinity is a necessity. The question is, when and how does the conversion conclude to hypermasculinity? The area of concern increases when you are not aware of the negative aspects provoked by social constructs imposed on what a man should be.